Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. Now that spring break is over, the push is on to reduce the chronic student absences that tend to increase this time of year. In Detroit, more than 56% of students are chronically absent. Every School Day Counts Detroit is a community partnership that is challenging students to create music, poetry, dance, and other videos to communicate the importance of showing up and being engaged at school.
We from Jalen Ross Leadership Academy.
Every School Day Counts Detroit, and we challenge DCH.
5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's turn it up. Let's take it up a notch. Let's go, move. Show 'em what we got.
I know I did months ago. I know you're trying to forget. I know I did the
I was raised under my mother's breast, taught to never hold my head down. When you fall, get back up. When you sit straight up. Don't make the same mistakes as me. Right my wrongs, but the copy and paste didn't take long. The game is real simple. Sing a sweet lullaby, teach me to fly, swim, keep your head up and you won't die. I'm a woman, I say, but the game I've yet learned to play. I'm under the influence of you, but I feel as though the world is taking me away from you. Drugs, alcohol, gangs, I'm under the influence of education, so I can build a nation. We stay in school, and that's period.
Somebody once told me don't listen to words. Words ain't nothing but thoughts out loud. Nobody thought I'd do nothing in life. I see y'all require what y'all thinking now. But to be honest, I really don't care. So go ahead and say it, y'all can't put me down. I want to be great, so I study the great, so I copy their cadence and mirror their style. People been counting me out. I'm counting my bars, they counting my sins. I'm seeing what these people do for the clout. I write it, record it, and do it again. Hear all the talk, that's all word of mouth. I want to see what they could do with the pen. Tired of hearing what y'all talking about, but I know as I grow, I'll just hear it again. Every School Day Counts Detroit.
Those are really great videos. Every School Day Counts Detroit is part of a national initiative that also provides resources to help families get children to school. Joining me now is the head of the local campaign, Reverend Larry Simmons of Brightmoor Alliance, along with community partner Christine Bell from Urban Neighborhood Initiatives, and one of the funders, Tammy Jones of United Way for Southeast Michigan. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, this sounds like a really great program. I want to start with that number, though. 56% chronically absent. When you think about all the other negative outcomes that we associate with Detroit schools and public education and all the challenges that we have with it, you probably can start with that number.
Yes, and that's the citywide number. That's
right.
Not just Detroit Public School
That's
District.
Everybody.
That's everybody. Charter, public, everyone. And the great thing about this is that community, many years ago, which is why I'm wearing this shirt to acknowledge the community's role 7 years ago in starting this effort, identified attendance as a major problem. And out of that, we came to find chronic absence and to begin this movement, Every School Day Counts Detroit.
Yeah. When we talk about the reasons that kids are chronically absent, I think then we get to some of the drivers of poverty and other things in our community. These things are not separate issues. They're all kind of interconnected.
Absolutely, they're all interconnected. And it's important that as we look at the issue that we understand that really being chronically absent is only missing 2 days a month. So,
okay.
So that
so
can
it's a pretty low bar, too,
yeah,
right?
it is a pretty low bar, and so issues of transportation, health, other issues of poverty, and also the school culture and climate. That is what we've learned from parents and students are major issues driving chronic absence.
Yeah. And of course, those bigger issues are all issues that United Way is really focused on. Talk about your involvement in this particular program, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, we know that the basic needs of residents continues to be a struggle in Detroit, but also across the Tri-County region. And so we do a lot of support around that, but recognizing that kids missing school is actually a real red flag. It's an indicator that a family needs support more than anything else.
Yeah.
And so it's a great opportunity then for us to say, if we know that kids are missing school, we don't need to wait until they miss 10 days. We can start when we see that they're missing 2 or 3 days in a month. and start to do the conversation with families then to put wraparound supports in place.
Yeah, and it's one of those issues that snowballs, right? You start missing a day or two here or there, and eventually you can grow to missing lots and lots of school.
And part of our research showed that over 76% of the people in Detroit don't know what chronic absence is. 2 days a month doesn't sound like much, but it accumulates to 10%, excuse me, school year. And those 2 days a month can cause a student to get on track to drop out of school, not to read on level, not to be able to succeed, and to get into more trouble. So the 2 days a month missing is the key message we're trying to get out to the community and asking others to share it with their friends and neighbors.
Well, and it's a great idea to have children themselves making the messages that you're going to send to kids, right? That's who they listen to more than
Christine
adults.
and you and I are big leaders in youth development and have a whole after-school program around that.
Yeah.
And what we found when we listened to young people is they said to us, particularly high schools students, why are you talking to my parents about it? I get myself to school.
Yeah.
And some of our kids get their siblings to school. So it was really important, I think, the effort and the messaging to ask young people to share the message and to be a part of this. And we're really excited because the hope is that we'll train young people to actually do the messaging work over the long term. So they'll drive not only content, but the actual putting it up on social media, monitoring, and so we're really excited about that effort as well.
Yeah, I used to cover public education in the city 25, well, maybe I don't want to admit that. it was about 25 years ago. But I can remember then that the absenteeism issue was more a focus at the beginning of the year, right? We would start school in Detroit and it would take weeks sometimes before teachers knew how many kids were going to be in their class or schools knew how many kids they were going to get because people couldn't get geared up to go to school. I don't know that I've heard of it as an after spring break issue, which is where you're focused.
What we discovered in the research is that there are peaks and valleys of absenteeism. And before and after holidays, you tend to be absent, but it still counts towards 2 days a month.
Right.
So even though it may not feel like you're doing much by extending your vacation late or starting early, it does. And the great thing about having kids send that message, Jalen Rose Academy has already done the videos you've seen. Detroit Academy of Arts and Sciences is working on some now. We have another 20 schools that United Way is connecting us with shortly. So we intend to explode this through use of our children as the messengers for themselves. It's a great addition and implementation that we got from our friends at Boulevard, which is our advertising partner.
Your work is, of course, primarily in the Brightmoor community. Talk about what this issue ends up looking like in that community. You don't have a lot of schools left in Brightmoor, right?
We have
they keep
one
getting rid of them.
DPSCD school. Actually, there are now 5 schools left in the community, one high school. But how it impacts us is we see kids on the street. We see test scores which are dropping. Almost 90% of our third graders cannot read at third grade level. Really, you can trace that to chronic absence. It is the best predictor of high school graduation of any statistic that we have.
Absenteeism.
The absenteeism.
Really?
Yes.
And so this is an important concept, and driving the message and the other programs. And without United Way and Skillman, which helped to underwrite this when nobody else would talk to us about this. When we first began this work, all they wanted to talk about was average daily attendance. And this young lady right here, in her current role and previously when she was at Skillman, Tammy was a key supporter with her leadership in keeping this movement alive to others could appreciate.
And what was the reason that people didn't want to talk about this?
So I think average daily attendance, which is tied to the funding that schools receive,
Sure.
It masks chronic absence. So you can have 85 to 90% of your students with their butts in seats on any given day and think you don't have a problem because most of your students are there. But out of that 10% who's missing, some of them are missing 1 or 2 days. Some of them are missing 45, 60 days a year.
Wow.
And those students have a profound impact not only on their own academic performance, but also what's happening in the classroom. From behavior norms to also just knowing what's happening and keeping up with content, a teacher has to give those students extra time, and it draws from everyone. So people just didn't understand how the data can change and how important it is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I would just agree with what Tammy said. I mean, it is. And I just want to add, when we were talking about chronic absence, that is being out of school for any reason.
Right, good
So
point.
suspensions,
Okay.
Doctor's
excused,
appointments.
unexcused, doctor's appointments. It's missing any academic instruction, and so that's what also I think makes it different. Is that's it's hard to conceptualize that, right? Like for whatever reason, my child's absent, and that could negatively impact their academics.
And the reason it's so important to reach out for those who come to understand this, because it was an aha for us. 2 days a month, that's all it takes. In every other part of life, 90% is good.
Right.
But in attendance, it's not. It
It's
makes you
not.
chronically absent.
Yeah.
And just think, if I miss school today and we're talking about multiplication, when I come back tomorrow and you're talking about division, I can't participate
I can't
in
do
class.
that. Right.
And the teacher has now got to interrupt the education of the other students to try and catch me up. And then day after tomorrow, Christine is absent. So it accumulates and slows down the learning of the entire classroom.
That's right.
And it's something that teachers, I think, recognize very regularly is having to do exactly what Reverend Simmons just said, and so it's really problematic.
What's the school side of this? I mean, you mentioned suspensions is one of the things that keeps kids out of school. Are you asking schools to think differently or more about this than they were?
Yes, yeah.
So when Tammy and I were working on the Coalition for the Future of Detroit School Children, an initiative championed by Skillman, chronic absence rose to the top of their list of concerns that have to be addressed because of this. And to the credit of Detroit Public Schools Community District and the charter community, both have embraced this and have begun to implement attendance teams, have redeployed attendance officers in new ways, and are recognizing that the early intervention, not waiting until the child was absent 10 days or 7 days, but catching them in that month when 2 days have been missed, that's when we began to work with the students through attendance teams and other interventions to get them to school. And we got social service agencies joining them.
Yeah. I mean, you say, you use that term, attendance officers. They were truant officers when I was a kid, right?
Right.
And that had a negative connotation, and it
Absolutely.
missed, I think, some of what you're talking about in terms of the reasons behind those absentees and addressing those problems as opposed to just going and catching kids and getting them in trouble.
And some of it is also the schools themselves having to think about their environment and how they make sure that it is inclusive and welcoming for students.
Yeah.
So if, for example, bathrooms are viewed as unsafe and students don't feel safe using the restroom during the day, sometimes they'll go home to go to the bathroom and they won't go back to school, right? These are real challenges that until the school knows, they can't do differently. And so really thinking intentionally about the environment, but also the relationships. Is somebody greeting those kids by name as they come into the door? Are they getting that high five?
Right.
These are things that will drive kids to want to be in school, and they're part of the factor
And it'll
too.
cut down on the numbers. Okay. Great work, and thanks for being here.
Thank you
Great,
for having
thank you
us.
so much.
2 days is too many.
2 days is too many. What a great phrase. Just ahead.